So Jesus addresses God as righteous Father. He's emphasizing the Father always does what is right, right? That he's righteous, true, he's just. And though the world rejected Jesus, the Father will vindicate him. Though darkness seems to prevail, righteousness will ultimately triumph, right? And so again, John or Jesus has done this throughout the book of John. He's contrasted the world, right, and the disciples. So again, at the end of the prayer, he starts talking about the world. He said, "The world doesn't know you, but I do." We've talked about what that world is, right? It's the people that reject the gospel, that reject the truth, who don't know the Father, who reject the Son, who remain in spiritual darkness. But then he contrasts that to the disciples. He says they have come to know the Father, that he sent the Son. So they have received his words, have believed his message. And so the difference becomes the revelation, right? Jesus came to make the Father known. He says, what you need? Oh yeah, you can go ahead and
You
look.
need
I think
to
if they're done.
loosen him through with the prayer now.
I think if they're done. It gets a little more.
Hot in here for
So Jesus came to make the Father known. Verse 26. Alicia's out of town, so yeah. He says, I have revealed you to them, and I will continue to do so. Then your love for me will be in them, and I will be in them. And so he, at the end of the prayer, right, he's talking about what his purpose is, for coming. John 1:18 said it this way: no one has ever seen God, but the unique one, who is himself God, is near the Father's heart. He has revealed God to us. So who's he talking about? He's talking about Jesus, right? He's talking about Jesus came to reveal the Father. And then he says, I will continue to do so. So this is a promise, right? He's prayed for the disciples. He's prayed for us, right? He's prayed for all the disciples that will come. And he's saying, I'm going to continue to reveal you to the people. Now, how's he going to do this? He's about to leave, right? He's about to leave physically. But his work of revealing the Father would not end after his resurrection. He would continue to reveal himself through what? Through the Holy Spirit, right? Through the apostles' teaching, through the scriptures, and his ongoing ministry among the people. So even though he left physically, we've already did that verse. He says what? It's better for you that I go away. Why? Because I can send the Holy Spirit, right? So he's going to continue to reveal the Father to us. So if we want to know what God is like, who do we look at? We look at Jesus, right? Because he was the ultimate revelation of who God is. And so even today, listen, Christ continues to make God known, right? How does he do that? Again, through the Holy Spirit. So the ultimate purpose, the prayer ends. This is how the prayer ends. So if Jesus is praying this prayer, we want to know what he's praying, right? How does he end this prayer? He says, then your love for me will be in them, and I will be in them. This is the destination of the entire prayer, which is communion, right? He says, your love for me will be in them, and I will be in them. And so there's this communion, there's this connection, right? And that is the prayer of Jesus. The prayer, if you'll go back and read it at some point, it's moved from, there's seven kind of things that Jesus has focused on in this prayer. One, he starts with glory, right? He says it's time for me to be glorified and to glorify you, right? So glory, the cross, the resurrection. Then he prayed for the protection of the disciples. Now we know the disciples still go through a lot of stuff, right? So what is he praying for? Is he necessarily praying for physical protection? He's praying for their faith, right? He's praying for the protection of their mind and the protection of their spirit. 3, sanctification by the truth. So we talked a lot about sanctification in this prayer. He's praying that they will be changed, that people will be changed by the word. 4, he prays for unity among believers. We talked about this for 2 weeks in a row, right? Jesus is praying that we would be unified, right? That we would be one body. Then he prays for their mission to the world. He knows that they're about to be sent out, right, into a hostile environment, right? He prays that their mission would be accomplished. Then he prays about their future glory when we get to see Christ, which is good. That's a good promise, right? That we get to see him as he really is. And then lastly, he ends with perfect communion, the Father's love in us and Christ in us. so it leads here. The prayer all leads to that as believers, we would live in the love of God and enjoy the presence of God. I've said it before. If we as Christians don't enjoy the presence of God now, I'm not really sure how we're going to feel about heaven, right? If we don't enjoy being with Him now. Many commentators say verse 26 this way: then your love for me will be in them and I will be in them. So again, it's a perfect closing to chapter 17 and to Jesus' prayer. It brings together the love of God within us and the presence of Christ within us, right? He is focusing on us being in perfect communion with the Father. He began the prayer talking about glory, and he ends the prayer talking about love, right? So he started with glory, he ends with love. I'm going to read verse 17:1. He says, Father, the hour has come, glorify your Son. So that's how he started the prayer. And then in verse 26, he says, then your love for me will be in them, and I will be in them. He began by looking forward toward the cross, right? When he's talking about the glory, glorify me, he's looking forward to the cross. But now he's looking forward to communion. Why? Because that's what the cross accomplishes, right? The cross accomplishes that we can be reconciled back to God, right? And so he's looking toward the cross, yes, but he's looking towards communion because that's the whole purpose of the cross. God just didn't send Jesus to suffer on the cross for no reason, right? There's purpose in it. And so I told you this is called the high priestly prayer. Well, this is where the high priestly prayer ends, right? Not with a command. He doesn't end with a command. He doesn't end. Now, he gives them a command when he leaves, right? He gives them the Great Commission when he's about to leave. But right now, it ends with a promise. He's like, look, the promise is that God's love can be in you and my presence can be in you. That's the promise of, he needs them to hold on to this because he knows what's about to happen, right? He knows what they're about to go through. And so the goal of redemption, listen, is not merely forgiveness. Forgiveness is good. We want to be forgiven, right? We want to not live in shame. But it's that we will share in the Father's love and enjoy the presence of Christ forever, right? I think so often we live separated from God because we don't really realize that that's His ultimate goal for us, right? Is communion with Him. Not just that we're forgiven. We are forgiven, and that's great, right? There's no more shame, no more condemnation. Those are all verses, right, that we talk about. But His ultimate goal is that we would be with Him. So John 18, we're going to move on. Now we know we're moving towards the cross, right? We got a couple of chapters. I'm probably going to get through verse 10, but I'm going to start in 1 through 3. It says, after saying these things, so after praying, right, Jesus crossed the Kidron Valley with his disciples and entered the grove of olive trees. Judas, the betrayer, knew this place because Jesus had often gone there with his disciples. The leading priests and Pharisees had given Judas a contingent of Roman soldiers and temple guards to accompany him. Now, with blazing torches, lanterns, and weapons, they arrived at the olive grove. I love John. He gives us details, right? He gives details of what it looked like. So John 17 ends with Jesus speaking of the Father's love, right? He's speaking of his presence in us. And then John 18 opens up with Jesus walking into the darkness of Gethsemane, right? He's walking into the darkness of a garden where obviously he had gone frequently. And John wants us to know, Judas would have known this, right? All the disciples would have known that this is where Jesus likes to go. This is where Jesus likes to go pray. The transition is powerful. Chapter 17 shows what Jesus came to secure, which is our communion with God. Now chapter 18 is going to show us what it's going to cost him, right? It's going to cost him his life for us to be able to have communion with God, right? And so he's praying about this communion, but then we get to see how are we going to get there? We're not there yet, right? We haven't been reconciled back to God at this point. How we're going to get there is the cross. And so the prayer ends with love. The passion begins with surrender. Now, Jesus leaves the upper room knowing exactly where the path leads. And yet he goes anyway, right? He follows the path. For the glory of the Father and the salvation of his people. Jesus goes where he knows Judas will find him, right? Judas the betrayer knows this place because Jesus had often gone there with his disciples. Get this, Jesus is not hiding, right? He's not hiding. He's going where he has been. There's been some times as we read the book of John that he keeps kind of away from the crowds, and he's kind of keeping away. Why? Because he would say, my time hasn't come. But now he said the hour has come, right? And so what I'm gonna go where they can find me. He deliberately goes to a familiar place where Judas can easily locate him. This fulfills what Jesus had been saying throughout John. Listen, his death is not an accident. It's the Father's plan, right? And so the hour has arrived, and Jesus walks directly into it. Now, I don't want you to miss this, because I don't know if y'all remember, because it's been 18 chapters. But when we started John, we talked about that this is basically a new Genesis, right? John is giving, why does he start with, in the beginning was the Word? What is he trying to take us back to? He's trying to take us back to Genesis, right? Where was Genesis? Where was Adam and Eve created? Where did they live? In a garden. Where are we now? We're in a garden, right? And so don't miss the I don't know the word I'm looking for, but don't miss the connections, right? And so N.T. Wright draws a connection between three gardens. There's three gardens in John's story. He takes us back to the beginning. In the beginning, we think about the Garden of Eden. Then we think about this Garden of Gethsemane, right? And then we're thinking about the garden when he's resurrected, right? He's also in a garden at that point. Because what does Mary think he is when he appears? A gardener, right? Yeah. And so there's obviously a garden around at that point. And so the Garden of Eden, listen, let's go back there for just a minute. Because if John is wanting to draw a parallel here, let's not miss what he's trying to draw. Who comes looking for who in the garden? God comes seeking Adam, right? And so, why? Because that's where he had always came, right? Don't miss it. John's like, Jesus went to where the disciples knew that he would be, right? So it's this familiar place. So God, in Genesis, comes looking for Adam. Why? Because that's where they had always met, right? That's where they had always been. And so, because they knew each other, they used to spend time together. He came to the garden because that's where he knew that Adam would be. And yet, there was no answer, right? Why? Because Adam was doing what? He was hiding, right? Why? Because he had sinned. And so now the roles are reversed. Instead of God looking for Adam, the men come looking for God, okay? Now, I don't know if they knew they were looking for God, but they were looking for God, right? And so men come into the garden looking for God. The contrast is dramatic. John paints the scene vividly. Listen, he says there's Roman soldiers. There's temple guards, there's torches, there's lanterns, there are weapons. Listen, they're coming with a posse, right? They're coming, an armed force comes looking for one unarmed teacher, right? Jesus is not a rebel. Jesus hadn't fought anybody, right? And so all of these guards and all of these, they come with torches and lanterns, imagine it, right? Now men are seeking God. Listen, like all humans, they are looking for God, but they don't know that that's what they're doing. They don't realize that what we're doing at this moment is we're actually going to arrest the very Son of God, right? The irony is profound. They bring lanterns, they bring torches to arrest the one who said, I am the light of the world, right? And so they're bringing lights to arrest the light. But unlike Adam, listen, Jesus is not hiding. I just said it. He's actually making himself available, right? So Adam was hiding from God. Jesus is not hiding from man. Jesus steps forward towards sinners. The first Adam fled from the consequences of sin. The last Adam is going to embrace them, right? Paul says it this way in 1 Corinthians 15:45. The scriptures tell us the first man, Adam, became a living person, but the last Adam, that is the Christ, is a life-giving spirit. Listen, so Adam, we know that Jesus is called the second Adam, but he's the complete Adam, right? He's the fulfillment of all that Adam could never have fulfilled. And so the story of Adam in the garden is standing behind this story in the garden of betrayal. Just like it is when we go to the resurrection in chapter 20. Remember when we started John, we talked about this being a new Genesis. How now we see what it means that the Word became flesh, right? And dwelt among us. And so, verse 4. So they come, they got torches, they got weapons, they got temple guards, they got Roman soldiers, they got all the people, right? Verse 4. Jesus fully realized, I'm reading the NLT version, I don't know what your version says, but it says Jesus fully realized all that was going to happen to him. Don't miss that word all. He realized all that was going to happen to him. So he stepped forward to meet them. Who are you looking for? He asked. So he knows, right? He's like, I know what's coming. Who you looking for? Tell me who you're looking for. Jesus is not seized before he knows what is happening. He's not being arrested and is like, I don't know what's going on here, right? He fully realizes what's going to happen. He is not surprised. Listen, he is not overpowered, right? It's not like they got the best of him. Oh, they got the best of Jesus in the garden. No, that's not what happens. He knows everything that is about to occur. The betrayal, the mock trials, the beatings, the scourging, the nails, the wrath and yet he steps forward. John says he steps out of the crowd. So I imagine him and the disciples are kind of in like a crowd, and Jesus steps out, right, and says, who are you looking for? This is the good shepherd laying down his life for the sheep. John 10:11. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd sacrifices his life for the sheep. Verse 5, it says, Jesus the Nazarene, they replied. Now, we talked about this before, right? That's kind of a slur, them calling him a Nazarene, right? Mm-hmm. They're degrading him. They're minimizing him. They're like, Jesus the Nazarene. He's just a Nazarene, right? I am he, Jesus said. Now, don't miss this. When he says I am, what is he saying? He's saying I am like God said I am back in Genesis, right? Mm-hmm. When he revealed himself to Moses. Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. As Jesus said, I am he. I want you to read me some different versions in a minute, but it says they all drew back and fell to the ground. Once more, he asked them, who are you looking for? And again, they replied, Jesus the Nazarene. Somebody read that in a different version than the NLT, verses 5 through 7.
Mine's pretty close to what you
just
read. It's the New King James.
Does it say they drew back?
It said they drew back and fell to the ground.
Okay,
that's what it says.
So we're going to talk about this. So the first words that Jesus speaks in this very tense situation, I imagine this is a very tense situation. Can you imagine how everybody's emotions and, right, if you've watched The Chosen, the latest season, this is the point that it ends, is when Jesus shows up with the posse to arrest Jesus, right? We see this is the part that we see play out, and then that's the finale. So we're waiting on the conclusion. But I love it because they're all kind of looking around like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? Right?
That's
like
what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Like the other disciples were like,
yeah. They're like, what's
what
Judas
is going on?
They're like, what's Judas doing over there? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's all of these things going on in their mind, and then they're beginning to realize, right? And they're beginning to realize what is happening. And so, if you've ever been in tense situations, right, you understand that you could probably feel the tension in the air, right? And Jesus, the first words that he speaks are not fear, but words of authority. They're calling him Jesus the Nazarene, and he's saying, I am, right? This is who I am, right? And so with words of authority, he confronts the arresting party. When they answer Jesus the Nazarene, he responds, I am he. John's wording echoes God's divine name, and the soldiers, listen, it says either drew back, fall backward, to the ground. And so the arrest begins with a reminder that the one who are being arrested is still the Lord. This forces us and them to see who Jesus really is. The Greek is I am, which echoes Exodus 3:14, God's self-revelation to Moses. Now, how many remember how many I am statements we have studied throughout John? Does anybody remember how many there are? There's 7. In the book of John, there's 7 I am statements. And Jesus said, I am the bread of life. Then he said, I am the light of the world. Then he said, I am the door. He said, I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the true vine. And now in the darkness of the garden, he just says, I am. Right? He's like, I'm all that. I've told you all that. I've taught you all that. I've shown you all that. I've did all the miracles. I've did all the stuff. Right? And now he's simply saying, I am. He is the I am. He is the bread of life. He is the light of the world. He is the resurrection, the way, the truth, and the life. So why did they fall? Why did they draw back? Why did they fall? Now, most commentators' interpretation of this moment is, for a brief moment, the glory and the authority of the Son break through and they can't handle it. And so they're like, whoo, he is, right? I mean, when God reveals himself to Moses, right, what happens? There's a burning bush and he's like, take your shoes off because you're standing on holy ground. Right. This is that same moment, right? They're experiencing that moment of I am, and they're like, we don't know what to do with this. And so they fall back, right? And they fall to the ground. John is showing that if a mere declaration can knock them to the ground, they're certainly not taking him against his will, right? They're certainly not they're not trapping him, right? He is I am. And in that moment, there is a glimmer of realization of who he is. There's power, right, that emanates from his statement of I am. Throughout Scripture, listen, people often fall in God's presence because it's weighty, right? The presence of God is weighty. And so John himself, when we get to, if you ever, I'm not doing Revelation, but if y'all go study somebody doing Revelation 1:17, what happens to John when he encounters the glorified Christ? It says he falls to the ground as dead. He's like, I don't know what to do with this, right? And so the same John that's writing this book, right, has a revelation of Christ risen, glorified, and he's like, I'm just like a dead man. I fall to the ground as dead. There are some commentators who will just suggest the soldiers were startled by his boldness, but listen, John is letting us know it's not the soldiers' weakness, it's Jesus' identity that causes them to fall to the ground, right? The irony is stunning. At the very moment that Jesus appears weakest, he's surrounded, he's betrayed, he's about to be arrested. John gives us one final glimpse of his glory, right? His glory shows up in the I am statement and everybody's knocked to the ground. Before they can bind his hands, they are laying on the ground before him, right? Before the cross, Jesus reminds everyone, listen, I'm not being overpowered, I'm giving myself. I'm stepping forward. Who you looking for? You looking for me? Okay. No one is in control of this situation except Jesus. We get a glimpse of the glory before the cross even happens, right? In John 17, Jesus had prayed about glory. In John 18, he steps forward to be arrested. Listen, the soldiers think that they're looking for a troublesome preacher. I mean, I love how The Chosen kind of portrays this too. The Romans didn't even really care. They're like, what's your problem with this man, right? Because they didn't understand the Jews' religion, and they didn't understand how they felt about all of this stuff. And so a lot of them are like, we don't get it. What's the big deal, right? Like, he's not hurting anybody. He's not doing anything wrong. And so they just think they're looking for a troublesome preacher just because they want to shut the authorities of the Jews up. They want to shut the high priests up, get the people right to be quiet. The priests think, listen, they think they're eliminating a threat. Right, he's a threat to our way of life. The Chosen does a good job of portraying that as well. He's a threat to our way of life. He's a threat to, listen, the priests were comfortable, right? They had authority, they had power, they had money, they had prestige. The people feared them, right? And they didn't want anybody coming in and rocking the boat, right? And messing up what they had going on. And so the priests think that they're eliminating a threat. Judas thinks that he's identifying his friend, his teacher. I don't know. Again, I don't know what Judas's purpose was. I truly believe that Judas thought that Jesus was going to come forth in power at this point and wipe them all out and do what Judas wanted him to do. But whatever Judas's purpose was, right? Judas is there. Yet in reality, listen, they are confronting God himself, right? He has revealed himself to be the Son of God. The armed crowd enters the darkness believing they are hunting Jesus, and in reality, Jesus is voluntarily presenting himself as the Lamb who will undo the tragedy that began in the first garden, right? He said, I'm the Lamb of God, slain before when? The foundation of the world, right? This has always been the plan. It's always been the plan. And he says, Jesus knows that he is about to open the way back into fellowship with God. The God Adam hid from, right, is now standing in the garden saying, I am, and I'm going to restore back what the enemy tried to steal all those years ago, right? Verse 8. He says, I told you that I am he. Y'all, I imagine I would have been like, y'all can get up now. I told you that I'm him, right? Jesus said, and since I am the one you want, let these others go. He did this to fulfill his own statement, I did not lose a single one of those you have given me. So Jesus, at this point, is acting, listen, as a protector, yes, but he's acting as a shepherd, right? He is placing himself between the danger and his sheep. And he's saying, look, I'm the one you want. Take me, let all of them go, right? He says, take me and let them go. And this is exactly what happens. Listen, the guilty walk away and the innocent is bound. The disciples are released because Jesus is taken. Listen, this is more than protection, it's substitution, right? And that's what the cross is, right? When we did Romans, we talked about there's a substitutionary element to Jesus being on the cross in our place, right? That we're not there, he is. And that he's starting it here with the disciples. He's saying, look, let them go, leave them alone. It's a preview of the cross, right? He's looking ahead. This is the gospel. Listen, that's the whole gospel message. Take me and let them go, right? Give me the punishment. I'll bear the sin. I'll bear the shame. I'll bear the torture. I'll bear the torment, and they can be free. Why would anybody resist that, right? Why would we resist that gospel? The Holy Son stands in the place of sinful men. The shepherd is arrested so the sheep can be spared. The one who deserves freedom is bound, and those who deserve bondage go free, right? So he's going to be bound. They're going to go free. Jesus is already acting out what his death will accomplish. He's already showing them what's going to happen on the cross. And then I love Peter. He's like my person. It says, then Simon Peter drew a sword and slashed off the right ear of Malchus, the high priest's slave. But Jesus said to Peter, put your sword back into its sheath. Shall I not drink from the cup of suffering the Father has given me? Now, John gives us some details of this story. He actually gives us the name of the person that Peter chopped the ear off of. Nobody else does. Matthew, Mark, and Luke do not. But they also show us that what does Jesus do for this slave? He heals him. He takes his ear, he puts it back on, and he heals him, right? Peter is doing, listen, what many of us would do. He loves Jesus. He is loyal. Listen, he's actually being pretty courageous, right? But he still misunderstands the nature of Christ's kingdom, right? He still understands what Jesus has really come to accomplish. Peter still thinks the battle can be won with a sword, and Jesus knows the battle can only be won with a cross, right? And so Peter is trying to prevent the very thing that Jesus came to accomplish. Now, if you, I think, I don't know if I've taught it or you've heard it preached, but when Jesus calls Peter the devil, he's like, get behind me, Satan. You don't have the thing in mind, the things of God. This is what's happening, right? Peter still doesn't understand that this is the way that it's got to play out, right? And so, listen, we often criticize him, but John, I think, presents it with a measure of sympathy, right? Peter, listen, he acts, he is devoted, he is sincere, he's courageous, he's just misguided, right? He just really doesn't understand. Since Eden, humanity has tried to solve problems through force, self-preservation, and control. That's how we do things, right? Look at the church. The church is a prime example, right? That we'll try to do things through coercion and control and force. Peter reaches for a worldly weapon because he believes the victory is going to come through fighting, and Jesus knows the victory is only going to come through surrender. What's really ironic to me is Peter is trying to save the only person in this situation who doesn't need saving, right? He doesn't need saving. He is the Savior. But Peter is trying to save him. And I get it. I would probably feel the same way, right? The issue is not power. The issue is purpose. Jesus is not going to the cross because he lacks the strength to avoid it. He's going because that's why he came, right? And they still don't quite have that yet. I love it. Jesus heals what Peter wounds. So Peter wounds the slave, Malchus. Luke records that Jesus healed his ear. That's where you can go read that Jesus put the ear back on. Listen, this is the final miracle before the cross, right?
Yeah.
It's the final miracle before the cross. And listen, it's not raising the dead. It's an act of mercy. He is putting an ear back on his enemy that is coming to arrest him, right? That's coming to take him to his death. He shows an act of mercy to his enemy. That's the last miracle that we see. That's important. Yeah. We should take note of that, right? That if the last miracle that Jesus chooses to perform is an act of mercy against his enemy, we should take note of that. John is the only gospel who gives his name. Why? Now, again, we talked about this. John's gospel is written probably 60 years after Matthew, Mark, and Luke, right? So we talked about that's why we believe the story of Lazarus being raised from the dead is only in John, right? Because maybe Lazarus' life would have been in danger if the other disciples had written about it. But now it's 60 years later. Maybe Lazarus is already dead again. Maybe there's all these things that's happened. Some now this is totally, I'm not giving y'all Bible, okay? This is opinion. There are some scholars who believe that this slave became known to the early church, right? And so 60 years later, John knows his name. Why? Did he get saved? Did he become a member of the church? I mean, if I'm coming to arrest a man and dude cuts off my ear and this dude heals me, I'm gonna kind of follow his story, right? I'm gonna kind of see what happens. The Bible doesn't say he became a believer, but listen, if you arrive to arrest Jesus, a disciple cuts off your ear, and Jesus touches you and restores your ear, and you become a recipient of Jesus's final recorded healing, I might believe you might become a believer, right? And so there's some reason that John knows his name. There's some reason that John knows who he is, right? The last miracle, I said it, it's not raising the dead, it's not calming a storm, it's not feeding a multitude. It is mercy shown to an enemy, and I believe that never left this dude, right? This would have been one of those things you're not gonna forget about, right? You're gonna remember that for the rest of your life.
Do you think at that moment he was like,
yeah,
why am I doing this?
Right. Oh, I'm
You
sure.
know,
I'm sure.
like,
Yeah.
This dude
Right.
just healed my ear.
And again, he was a slave to the high priest, so he might not even been there of his own volition. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what his purpose was. But listen, let's talk about Peter for just a second. Peter's mistake is one that we still make today. Believers. I'm talking about believers. Sometimes we defend Christ in ways that are not anything like Christ. Can we say it again? Sometimes we defend Christ or Christianity in ways that it don't look anything like the Christ that we're defending. Listen, the Pharisees defended God's law, but they often did it without God's heart, right? They were just rule keepers. Paul says it this way: you can speak the truth and have great knowledge, but without love, you just become a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal, right? That's in 1 Corinthians, the love chapter, right? He says, listen, if I know all truth and I have all knowledge and I don't have love, I'm just making a lot of noise, right? And so, listen, I don't want to win an argument and lose compassion for the person, right? I don't want to not see them as someone that Jesus died for, right? And so listen, if we speak the truth without gentleness, or we treat people as enemies to defeat rather than sinners to reach, right? They're not our enemy. The world is not your enemy, right? The world, they're lost, yes. They need Christ, yes. But we should present the truth in love, right? Jesus never compromised truth, but he was also full of grace, right? When he spoke the truth to people, he spoke it with grace. The character of Christ must accompany the defense of Christ. Jesus, listen, I love this. I didn't come up with this. It says Jesus should approve of not just what we say, but how we say it.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just the words that we speak. David is big on this. Your tone. It's not what you said, it's how you said it. Right?
I'm big
Whatever.
on that too.
Whatever. He's talking to me. He's talking to me most of the time when he says that. But listen, how many of us have a tone, right? And so, listen, it's not always what we say, but how are we saying it? How are we presenting the truth of the gospel? Listen, there are truths that we should not veer from. We should not look like the world, and we should not agree. But it has to be presented in love, right? We reach for power and swords, and Jesus is calling us to crosses and faithfulness, right? Peter's not wrong. He's not wrong to want to defend the Lord, right? But Jesus is like, that's not what I'm calling you to, Peter. Have you not listened to anything I said? Like, I can imagine that's what he's saying. Peter wanted a conquering Messiah, listen, which he is. He is a conquering Messiah. But what Peter didn't want was a suffering Messiah. And he's also that, right? He suffered so he could conquer, right? And Peter didn't want the process. How many of us want the results without the process? Right? We live in a quick fix generation, right? We want everything quick. We want a pill to solve everything. Just give me a pill or give me this or give me that. Right? We don't want to take the long road, the process to get to where we have to be. This is what Peter wants, right? He wants the conquering Messiah, which he's going to get, but he doesn't want the process that we have to go through to get there. And so how often do we do that in our lives, right? Listen, y'all have all heard this statement. There can be no crown without a cross. Without the cross, there's no crown, right? So Jesus rebukes Peter. Listen, because the kingdom will not be established by violence or by coercion or by force. It will be established through the sacrificial obedience of the Son, who willingly drinks the cup the Father has given him. I'm going to read the verses again, 25 or 10. It says, Then Simon Peter drew a sword and slashed off the right ear of Malchus, the high priest's slave. But Jesus said to Peter, Put your sword back into its sheath. Shall I not drink from the cup of suffering the Father has given me? He's saying it's the Father's will, right? Peter, this is what I've been trying to tell you. This is where we're going, right? And so we'll continue next week, verse 11. But does anybody want to share anything? Oh, all right.